Mean Streets Podcast, Season 4, Episode 4. William Galloway. On the other side of the screen is Britton Johnson. The Alabama Crimson Tide are hitting their stride in conference play. 16-3 overall. They've won 10 of their last 11 games, dating all the way back to November, 2 losses ago. So, Britton, you got to be impressed with what you've seen from Alabama and really hot start to conference play. What do you make of it?
Yeah, there's the one head scratcher against Ole Miss that we'll kind of get into, but the rest of kind of the last, like you said, 11 games have just shown continuous improvement. It seems like the team's really starting to gel. I feel like guys are starting to find their roles and thrive in them, and that's what you want to see in middle late January as the team start to gel into form and to hopefully what they're going to be in March. Excited to see once we get Darion back, just kind of what that looks like, but the fun thing about this team is there's so much talent. Like sometimes less is more, as crazy as that sounds. And so finding that right balance of getting everyone back and having them contribute just within their role is going to be really interesting the next few weeks. But overall, I mean, we were saying this before. I think 5-1 start to SEC play. If you're to ask Alabama fans coming into this tough slate, if they'd be okay with that. I think most would. I just don't think Ole Miss would have been the one that people would have expected to drop.
Yeah, totally. And I think that, you think about going to Lexington, you went to College Station. By the way, when you went to College Station, you got a 6 point win. You beat South Carolina by 20 in Columbia. I mean, it's been an impressive slew for sure. Again, you mentioned without Darion Reed, obviously Latrell Wrightsl's out. Houston Millett didn't even play against Vanderbilt. I think the biggest thing we talk about playing the roller coaster of the season and the conference. You look at the Ole Miss game. Alabama wasn't able to play a complete game by any means of the word, not even close to a complete game, right? But you look at Vanderbilt, they started to make runs. Then Alabama really never let their foot off the gas, and I think that is going to be that's probably. I'll ask you, is that the hardest thing to maintain that foot on the gas mentality for 40 straight minutes, no matter who you're playing and where you're playing?
Yeah, I think a lot of times, especially, and we've talked about this a few times, Alabama fans have a tendency to look at things through a football prism. And so the idea of like bouncing back game to game seems so obvious. Like, of course, you're going to play at a certain standard every game. But in basketball, it's just different because of how quick these turnarounds are. And so I definitely think that was a factor in the Ole Miss one of the fact that it was the third game he had played in 7 days. He plays two straight teams on the road, get a big road win at A&M, and you come back to, play at home against Ole Miss. And, it's not an excuse for it, but I certainly think that that's the reality of it's so hard to get yourself as prepared as possible every single game. And it takes a super, special team, but at the same time, it's kind of what's expected out of champions. And so I remember I'm sure a lot of y'all felt this way. This is the most frustrated I had been after a loss in a super long time. Just because I feel like a lot of the reasons we lost were effort things, were the fact that we weren't hitting the boards hard. We kind of were letting them be more physical than us. Um, we were turning the ball over in stupid ways, not just, careless ways, but I felt like we were kind of driving single gaps way too much. And so all of that, accumulated into us kind of getting our butts whooped at home. And I walked away from it being like, we're not there yet. And, championship teams don't lose at home, especially in that way. Um, but then to bounce back against Kentucky on the road and get that win, I want to say it just completely flipped how I felt about it. But I think it did show a lot of character and toughness to be able to respond to that. And now it's going to be the test of this upcoming stretch of kind of can we be consistent every single game? I heard some of the guys before this Vandy game saying, we just, weren't 100% locked in coming to that Ole Miss game. We just dropped one at home. We're not doing it again this year for this game, and they obviously performed at a high level against Vandy. I think the stat from that game is just the amount of runs we went on that were double figure runs, and so that's what's so dangerous about this team is you have guys at every point of the rotation who can come in and provide a huge spark offensively. Obviously, Aiden Holloway's been getting a lot of love recently for his performances, but Mo D has been phenomenal. We can kind of get into it all, but even in Kentucky, I mean, starting off, Grant was awesome. and gave us a huge burst. But then you have certain games where it's the bench guys that come in and almost outperform the starters. So that's what makes us so dangerous. All it takes is one run and we can completely flip a game. Um, and we're just so volatile in that way. So, but as to the consistency point, I think we're there. It's an unexplainable game, and as long as it stays that way, I don't have a problem with it. But we just can't let a game like that happen again. And I think if we're able to win all the games we're supposed to at home and beat the teams we're better than that on the road, we'll have a chance to be 15-3, 16-2 would be really tough. 15-3 is realistic, I think.
And could easily win the
14-3 would
league.
still be good. And at least get a share of the league. Yeah. So, um, a lot of road left, but I'm really happy with where we're at, and while also recognizing we still can grow a lot.
Yeah, Britton, talking about that, you talked about some of the personnel. And I want to ask you because Modi and some of the guys, I think Coach came out and talked about the personnel, right? You had Sears eclipse 2,500 career points. That's a huge milestone. Obviously, his fifth year in college, but we talked about missing Darion Reed right now. He'll be back. We've talked about Reitzel, but I want to say something about Modi because, and I really ask you about it too, because the way he's played has been like a bull in a china shop, but not only that, on both ends of the floors, and bull in a china shop defensively, and then just smooth, silky glass, great finishes on offense. I mean, he is getting it done on both sides of the floor like we hadn't seen in a guy since Herb Jones. And I know that Twitter drew a lot of comparisons, but talk about, because they said this in the press conference, they're putting in packages for him. It's not even late in the season relatively, but when you're putting in packages, it's September, October in the preseason. And when you're able to do that and adjust in mid to late January with February right around the corner, how tough is that? Because that speaks volumes about what he means to the team, but also what the program's able to do and putting in a package for him and the guys, being behind it.
Yeah, I mean, there are a few guys I like more on this team as basketball players than Modi Abate. I mean, he's just a dog, and you can get into what he does well and what he can maybe improve on. But at the end of the day, when you put him in the game, you're going to put in a guy that's going to make tough and winning basketball plays. And you need that, especially when you have as much skill as you already have on this team. I mean, you have a lot of skill and finesse. Um, you need a guy who's just going to be willing to do all the dirty work. And, I'm always wary to use the Herb Jones comp, but I do see the comparison from the standpoint of those guys go in there, they play great defense, they rebound the ball really, really well, and they make winning plays throughout the game. And, also the offensive element of you can't let them get to the rim. They're great around the rim at finishing. And Mo is getting better and better throughout the season. He's a guy who, beginning of the year, I was like, because we were so deep, I was like, he's good enough. He's got to be in the rotation. That's all I could say about it at the
You
time.
can't keep him out. Is what you
You can't
said.
keep him out of the rotation. Now I'm like, how do you keep him out of the closing lineup? He has been that good for us. And so he's the dude that'll be the X factor. I saw someone say, I think Mo will win us a game in March, and I fully believe that. He's the type of guy that you need on a championship level basketball team. And I'd also kind of extend that to Darion a little bit. Um, we've missed him, and I think he is a guy that is willing to go in and just make those tough plays and do a lot of the same stuff. I just think Mo's just been so efficient in the way in which he's done it recently. And also give tip of the cap. I know he hasn't had the best offensive season, but Jaren Stevenson's been really good and selfless in that regard too. And
Well, the
um,
way he stretches the floor and makes the defense change the way they have to guard, that's
yeah,
enough. It's like having a 7'3" shot blocker. It changes the way the other team has got to guard.
for sure. But overall, I like my biggest takeaway, I think from some of the early games was some of the guys who maybe expected to step up were starting to do so. I even think in that Kentucky game, Mo was massive down the stretch. But if you were to be like, who is this game, revolving around, you'd say, well, Grant Nelson was unbelievable. And he's a guy that was expected to be unbelievable coming into the year. Um, I don't think it was a great Mark Sears game, but he had big moments late that kind of helped us get where we needed to get. And I thought it was the game against Kentucky. where we finally saw Cliff play at the level we wanted him to. The way he was impacting shots on the defensive end, the way he was catching lobs and finishing around the rim, he was awesome. But now you look at these, I kind of lump Kentucky into that, but I think in these last stretch of games, it's been a lot about the guys off the bench who have just performed at a super high level. We talked about Mo. He's been awesome. I think Aiden Holloway has been a stud. Uh, just when we lost Latrell, I feel like we needed a guy that was going to come in and just be a high level shot maker. And I love the role that we've carved out for Aiden, where if he's not, he doesn't really have it going, we don't have to rely on him to have a career day. But if he's hot, he's just such a factor. He's such a game changer. And then one other dude that I think has been, and I could probably talk about all the guys, the way they've impacted winning. I've loved what Youngblood's added to this team. I think he's just such a veteran leader for this group. I think he's another guy that makes a lot of winning plays. Um, and I just have this feeling that he's a big shot maker. Like at the end of the game, if he's taking the shot, I'm feeling good about it. He's already made a few big ones. He made a big one against Kentucky. He's made a few other just big shots on the stretch.
He hit
But
his first two against Vanderbilt last night.
yeah, that's a Britton Johnson stat line of just getting them threes up. But
2 and 2 and
he,
get him out of here.
yeah, he is a guy that
Coach
I
on the
think
floor.
will have some big moments for us down the stretch of the season. So it'll be interesting because obviously early on, LeBaron Philon looked like he might have been the best player on our team, and he's still a stud. But it's like that's where we're going to be figuring out how exactly this team gels, the lineups that work, the lineups that don't. And I think we're starting to really see it kind of come together a little bit, which is exciting. So, um, it's funny that I think this team came in with such high expectations, and I think early on people were like, they're really good, but not quite maybe what we expected coming in. And some people probably still feel that way. But again, I'm looking at this from they are projected one seed. We've put up 100 points, I think, more times in a season since like any teams in like like decades. So, and this is at the midway point. So you imagine we do it a few more times. Um, and I think defensively we're getting better. We're not there yet. I think the second half of the Vandy game was proof that we're not there yet. I thought we were good in the first half and kind of let our foot off the gas defensively. But I think that we're starting to see the pieces come together for this team, and it's really exciting to see because we kind of provide just a nightmare matchup for anyone because you could put your best guy on Sears for a game and keep him to. I mean, he's going to score 20 points, but keep him to 20 points that's quiet or whatever, and then you have a guy like Aiden Holloway or a guy like LeBaron Philon or whoever just really get off early on you. And so it just kind of creates a problem where if your seventh guy can't guard at a really high level, they're going to get burned by Alabama. So, or I guess just play all five of your starters for 40 minutes. But I've loved kind of seeing the progression of this team, the progression of this group, and the way we're gelling right now.
4 out of the last 7 games, Alabama scored over 100 points. I think
Is
six
that
times
good?
all season. That's pretty good. We'll take
Feels
that.
good.
So, Britton, what do you have to do to continue that? Because you've got trips coming up, and they may be weeks down the road. But you end the season at Auburn. You're going to have to play in Thompson Bowling Arena in Knoxville. You go to Starkville, which we saw from the Mississippi State Ole Miss game is a really good place to play. You've already won at Lexington, but you've got the rest of your SEC schedule. You don't even have to go through it. You go to Austin to know that you've got really good games. So, what is the message? When you're in a locker room, what's a message on battling complacency when you're having success?
Yeah, my hope is that the guys are mature enough just to know that the goal ahead of them requires consistency. You can't, and with the teams you're going up against, it's just not an option to take any more games off. Um, and I think the guys have the DNA to do it. At the end of the day, like if you're playing to a standard, you don't get caught up in like the complacency game. And it's the best way to fight human nature is to say we're playing to a standard, not to a scoreboard or result. The reality is this team still has, and this is why I think you know Alabama fans not only should just be happy with how the season's going, but optimistic about the future of the season. Is I think we have so much room to grow still, and I'm sure that's what Oates is stressing defensively, we still have a long way to go to being the team that we want to be in March. And I think ultimately the thing Oates is going to stress is, look, it's great that we're putting up 100 points in all these games, and I hope we continue to do it. What I've loved about scoring is that it's not relying on shooting necessarily, but we're able to score regardless of how well we shoot. But what's going to win us these games is our defense, because defense is what travels. You're going to have a really cold game, and let's say the hump. You go to Starkville and have a rough shooting night. Are you able to get enough defensive stops, play rebound at a high enough level? These things that you can control. It's all effort stuff. Are you able to do that at a high enough level to win these games? And if you are, then the sky's the absolute limit for this team, because if we can kind of get that, and yeah, outside of the Ole Miss game, I think our offensive rebound has been unbelievable. If we can do that every single game, that travels. Doesn't matter where you're playing. If you can offensive rebound at a high level, it presents problems for your opponent. So it's those kind of things. And the beauty of it for Oates is what he gets to preach every single game, because we're so deep. I think about my senior year, we didn't have a lot of depth. And so we kind of had to roll out who we had to roll out. And if they didn't have a great effort game, it's just kind of like, oh, well, kind of is what it is. We're just going to lose that one. But with the depth that we have, Oates can just say, hey, man, if you're not going to give me 100%, I'm just going to sit you on the bench and you're not going to play. And that's not me being mean. That's not me hating you. It's me doing what's best for a team and trying to win basketball games, because we have so many great players. I'm talking about Houston Millette not playing right now. I don't know if there's a more selfless guy on the team. And you don't think he can go in and make winning plays? How selfish do you have to be if you're a rotation guy to look at Houston on the sideline and say, you know what, I'm not going to die for this loose ball. I'm not going to play elite defense right now. I think that the standard of the program is such that it requires that out of you. And, I think he's going to continue to get it. And I think the depth helps with that. So,
Hey, let me
it's a
ask you this,
continuing
because
thing.
you've been
But
there, you've played that. What is it about Nate Oates? Because I'm not Nick Saban won 6 national championships. He's not Nick Saban, but you don't see that out of every coach. You see some complacency. You see coaches that don't instill the greatest value or trust in guys, and then they go in the transfer portal. So, as somebody who knows and played for Nate Oates, how is he able to get that out of his guys? One, we know they have a ton of talent, but aside from the talent and aside from his coaching ability, which he's proven, what is it about him?
I think you can't ask things from guys in games that you don't require out of them in practice. And I simply think that Alabama is one of, if not the very hardest practicing programs in the country. And then the other thing is an internal thing for it. He's the single most competitive guy I've ever met. If we're playing a game of ping pong, he wants to rip my heart out. He wants to beat me 21-0 and embarrass me. And so it resonates with the team over time, because when you go into practice every single day and your coach is that competitive, you have to bring your A game every day in practice. Otherwise, you're going to hear it from them, and you don't want that. And so, what it leads to is by the time game comes around, it is routine to be excellent. It is routine to make tough plays and winning plays. And so, not doing that is, not the ordinary thing. It is going against the grain of the routine. So that's how you require it, is you build that standard in practice, and then all of that follows. But I've been around programs that, or just heard stories of programs that don't require that on a daily basis. And late September, they're not grinding, or in conference play, they're not still going hard. And then of course you're gonna have some let ups, but like that's just not a thing that happens at Alabama. And especially again, when you have depth and you can sit a dude, I think that there's so much to that as well. So that's what I love about this team is, yeah, this hasn't happened yet, but if LeBaron's not playing, if LeBaron's not playing hard, if LeBaron's not making tough plays, they got like 3 dudes on the bench that we can just immediately throw in for them. And I think that in and of itself kind of keeps these guys, I don't want to say in check, but uh, definitely makes them want to adhere to the standard.
So talking about adhering to the standard, I know when you were in high school, there were plenty of games where you'd come back from a road game or after even a home game, and you got to go lift weights and you got to go practice, right? Because it wasn't good enough. Are there any examples of that when you played at Alabama, of things that he may do after a game or even after a bad practice where you restart or whatever. Did anything like that ever happen?
Trying to think. Well, nothing after a game, but I was telling a story to someone recently about because all the stories of Oates practices have come up, and those opening few, in particular. But there was this one, we have five non-negotiables as a program defensively, and so especially in these preseason practices, we do it throughout the season, but particularly in those kind of grinder practices, those are strictly adhered to. I mean, they're always, the coaches are always kind of calling out if you're not doing them, but like you restart a drill if you don't do it. And so we have these drills that will kill you. I mean, we have one called strike drill that if I try to go into explaining, it's complicated, but it's basically like a transition endurance drill that lasts 8 to 10 minutes usually, if not longer, where you're just going the whole time, and then you restart if you mess up one of those things. And so it's a lot of stuff like that of just you always have to be on your A game, or if you let out, you're going to hear about it and you're making your teammates, you're punching your teammates essentially. In terms of like after game stuff, I don't think there's ever a time we've gone and practiced, but there's been so many times where I've walked in the practice gym after a game and guys have been getting up shots. And so again, I think that kind of speaks to the culture that's been built of it's not just it is coach led to an extent, but it's also player led. Like guys have that work ethic in them that I think the coaches bring out of them to some extent, but also they have it in them.
And it sounds like from what the team meeting was or what the message was from Coach Oates that after the Ole Miss loss, before getting on the plane to Kentucky, he said, "Don't get on if you're not going to give max effort, and
Yeah.
don't get on if you're not going to go out there and
Further,
play
don't get
hard
on if you don't plan on getting a win.
Yeah,
We're winning
not
this
planning on
game.
winning.
And I love that stuff. I think it's a combination of you have to instill confidence in these guys and you have to also challenge them. I think that's kind of what he did there. And before we go, I do want to mention one moment that I loved as much as any recently. I believe it was the South Carolina game. Um, we let up, and this again speaks of the standard that Coach Oates has built. Um, we let up a transition dunk off a make, and I was actually in my criminal procedure class. I should not have been watching the game. I was, and I literally got so upset because you don't let up transition buckets off a make, especially just a transition dunk like that. It's just like such a no. And I was getting very upset. Like I was literally signaling, I was like in my head, like, Coach, you better call timeout. And sure enough, he calls the timeout and he's up at half court yelling at Darion, who's a freshman, who handles the coaching beautifully. I mean, he couldn't have handled it better. But I loved that moment because it was a moment that if you're a basketball junkie and you've been around the game, you see that and you're like, that's such a bad basketball play. We were up a lot of
Yeah.
points, or we were up comfortably, but Oates just immediately being like, no, that's not what we do here. I think
Was that
speaks
the
to where we're
one?
at
Was
as
it
a
yesterday, or was
program.
that one a couple games ago where it was a lapse in communication and there was a mismatch? Like we didn't match up right in transition.
That was I'm trying to remember. It's happened a bunch. I think the Kentucky game it happened a few times where they got a few transition threes. But honestly, I think it's probably happened at least once in almost every game. At Ole Miss game, it happened late and there was a dagger. It had
Yeah.
a three in the corner off transition. And I'm glad I wasn't in that film room the next day for that one. That would have been talk about an all-time bad film day.
Yeah. Hey, Britton, let me ask you any closing thoughts on Alabama before we jump to the end of our show here in a minute.
Yeah, just a lot of optimism for where we're going. I think we got LSU at home should be a win. Can't count your chickens before they hatch here in the SEC, but Mississippi State will be a big marker for where we're at toughness wise as a program because it'll be at the hump. We're not going to get a good whistle. And Chris Jans has those guys playing really hard, as the Mississippi State always has been a hard playing team. So, positioned ourselves really well, but we just got to continue to get better.
Yeah, I'm excited. Looking around the rest of the league, give me a quick hitter here. Who's somebody or a team that's impressed you? Maybe a name you didn't have on your radar at the beginning of the season. I know you're a busy law student, so you may not watch every game, but like I'll give you an example. Georgia in coming up in a week and a half surprises me because they took a Janai broomless Auburn down and at home played a really good game, had a tip in. They if they would have gotten another, that much, they would have tipped it in and gone to overtime. But they've been impressive. What about you?
Yeah, it's tough because I feel like you could put half the SEC teams in that category, and I don't mean to be superlative in saying that, but Ole Miss, we've talked about how they beat us. I don't know that they're a particularly great team, but Chris Beard has done such a good job with them, and they're going to be a team that you could conceivably see winning a game or two in March. And I don't know if you ever said that coming into the year. Um, I think, like you said, Georgia has been really impressive. Missouri has been better than I expected them to be. Um, Vandy's been better than I expected them to be. I didn't expect them to be this good. And then one team that I think is just bounds better than I maybe expected was Florida. Like I expected Florida to be good, and maybe I was sleeping on them early, but they have been really, really an elite basketball team. And so,
Has that like
um,
7'4" kid done anything?
yeah,
Does he
no, he
play?
didn't play. But honestly, everybody in the SEC has impressed me at least once, except for Arkansas. I mean, Cal has those guys bumbling right now, but
Time to retire. Time to take those
yeah, we'll
spicy
see.
chicken
He
nuggets
might
and
be able to get it rolling. Year one's
head to the
sometimes
farm.
tough, but it has not been a good stretch for them. So, um, yeah, the league is better than it has ever been. It is by far and away the best league in basketball, and so it's been so fun to watch and just appreciate good ball.
Hey, just for a minute and a half, let's jump to the mid-major. Sanford at 15-4 right now, and 5-1 in conference play. Dropped its 20 the opportunity for the 29th game in a row to win at home. They lost against ETSU on Saturday, 4,700 people, second highest crowd since Steph Curry came back in 2009, I want to say, when Davidson took on Sanford. But at the mid-major level, it all boils down to conference play and then that conference tournament, being in a one-bid league. And so Sanford's still, I think, half a game or a full game in first place. You got to go to ETSU. You got to play Furman twice. So lots of opportunities. What have you seen from your Sanford Bulldogs, your fifth year squad?
Yeah, I mean they've been good. Like you said, they dropped a really disappointing game against ETSU. Just did not play well. And it's really disappointing to not play well in front of such a great home crowd. But to be ahead of everyone in the league right now, I think it is closely as contested. It has been as closely as contested as ever in the SoCon. I mean, I could see five or six teams winning that league in some capacity. So it could all come down to just seeding and matchups in March. But if you're Stanford, all you can do is try to keep winning, get that one seed. So I think they're in a good spot. Just got to keep getting better. Can't let a repeat performance of that ETSU game. Um, and just, yeah, I think Bucky has them in a good spot, though. So uh, having Ryland back, having some of those guys back, Trey Fort's been really good. Um, and so I think they're in a good spot. They just got to keep getting better.
All right, he's Britton Johnson. I'm William Galloway. The way we close these things out is Britton, you get the last word, and that'll be it for the podcast. I want everybody to check out Mean Streets Podcast on Twitter. You can listen on Apple or Spotify or SoundCloud. You can watch us now on YouTube. So if you're watching, thank you for doing that. And BJ, take it away.
I don't got much to say. Let's see how many gumps in the hump we can get next Wednesday. Roll Tide, go Bulldogs, and have a great weekend.